3D printing and radio-controlled vehicles. Two hobbies that can go great together. Hello everybody, Chris here, and when I was younger, I was crazy about everything that was radio-controlled. I got into RC at a very young age, and always wanted to get back into it as I got older. Now, 3D printing kind of took over my life, but I did decide to build an OpenRC F1, the one you see right here, and I made videos about it a couple of years ago. And all of that content is still relevant. The project is still pretty much the same. But if you remember when I did that series, I used some of my old school electronics from the 90s to power this car. And this car is definitely due for an upgrade. Here's what it looked like when I first built it. You can see I'm using an older electronic speed control. I've got an old 6-cell NiCad battery. This stuff was so large that I couldn't even fit in the car well and keep the top on. But it did power the car successfully, and it was slow enough that it was pretty easy to control. Now, I did first think about just going and buying a ready-to-run RC car so I could get up and running quickly. But then I thought maybe we should revisit the F1 because we never really gave it a chance with those old electronics. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to get it up to speed with some more modern electronic parts. I'm going to show you all the information that Daniel gives you on how to source these, what it might cost, and we're just going to see how it performs, as well as talking about Daniel and the project along the way. There are a ton of these cars out there, and it is a perfect project to get you up and going if you happen to be a 3D print person and an RC person. So let's start by taking a look at the parts that we're going to use. Now, Daniel has a lot of awesome projects out on his website, not just the F1. He's created many different designs, but he also does have a lot of information on how to source the parts and put this whole thing together. All of the parts that I'm using on my car are from the list of his suggestions. And this is pretty much the list of parts that he's found that are the most cost-effective and perform the best. You do have a few different options here and there, like brushless versus brushed motors, so you can pick and choose. I ordered all my parts from Banggood links off his site. And here's what we ended up with. Probably the most important part is the radio. These are so much cheaper nowadays than they used to be. This is a FlySky FS GT3C. This is light years away from my old Futaba. It even has a little readout on the top. It is 3-channel, it's very lightweight, comes with a rechargeable battery, you can charge it up USB, and a very teeny tiny little receiver. I am amazed how many features these little radios have. You can get this one for around 60 bucks. And you can take your receiver and transmitter to any car. So you don't even have to buy multiples of these if you don't want to. For the electronic speed controller, I went with the Hobbywing Quick Run 1060 for brushed motors. It's very cost effective as well. I got this one for 30 bucks, and it's waterproof. Not that we'll probably need it. I have to say, it's nice and small, it's already wired up, ready to go, and it's packaged really well. So that's good, and it even comes with a book. For the motor, I just went with a brushed motor. This is a 540 80T. This cost around $17. For the battery, I got a Zop Power 7.4 volt, 2200 milliamp. This was 25 bucks. It's ready to go with the style connectors that we have. And then I needed a LiPo charger. This is an IMAX B6, it's an 80 watt. This being the most expensive part of my build, but if you're already into newer RC, you probably already have something like this. This was 130 bucks. But outside of this, all the other parts are relatively inexpensive, even the radio. And of course, you still will need a servo to turn the front wheels. There's a lot of these micro servo options out there that will fit in this car. You can go with the plastic one. This is a 90S. You can go with the Metal Gear MG 90S. Or a little bit nicer one. This is a JX. It's a PDI 1109 MG. Same size, maybe just a little bit higher quality. Now, putting all the electronics in the car is going to be pretty much exactly the same as we did before. Not a lot has changed. Now, I think I will have to change up a few connectors as far as the battery and the controllers are concerned, but it shouldn't be that big of a deal. So, we're just going to time-lapse this build as I get this thing back up and running. So just a couple of tips when you're assembling these. I switched the battery, the charger, the speed control plugs over to XT60 connectors. It's just better to standardize because not all of these come with the same types. And if you have a bunch of batteries, convert over to these. I think these work the best and they're a nice tight fit. Now they can be just a little bit tricky to solder. Also on your electronics and your battery, you can grab some double-sided tape, stick them down if you'd like. If they're going to be in the car permanently, I actually like to switch these out to different cars. So do that however you like. And on the motor, so I mentioned this is an 80-turn motor. It's going to have more torque, but it's going to be a little bit slower. Daniel actually recommends going with a 35-turn. I like the little slower motor just getting started because it's a little easier to control, but you can grab whatever motor that you would like. On these radios, it's actually pretty easy to get these set up. You do have to bind that transmitter and the receiver. There's a jumper that goes on the receiver that you put on, and then you hold bind, this button here, and then power on, and that will bind it up so you can start using it. Also, I like to plug in the servo here for the steering and get the controller powered up first so I know where to put that arm, so it's kind of in the center, and then the rest of it I can set with trim on the radio. If the motor's flip-flopped, you can switch the wires around, or you can just switch it on the radio as well. That's what I did. I just switched it up here. And I'm not really great at soldering things, I'll have to admit. And these were just a little bit of a learning curve when I had to start using them. But just a quick tip, solder them assembled like this, both sides. It gives you a little bit more thermal mass, and you'll have less of a tendency of burning up this connector. I suggest you tin the tip of your wire, and don't forget, I'm just doing this as an example, but don't forget to put on your heat shrink if you don't have the ones that have the removable cover. Put your heat shrink on first when you're going to make one of these. Hopefully you can have enough room so the soldering heat doesn't affect your heat shrink. Put your wire down in there, and then just start heating up that connector until you can feed the solder and fill up that whole cup. That should give you a nice tight connection. Putting some flux on your tin wire isn't a bad idea either. That'll help that solder flow into the wire. But buy extras of these. If you're going to go with the XT60, you might have to practice a few times before you get the hang of it. So there's our electronics upgrade, and there's really not much to it. Most of the information you're going to need is going to be specific to the parts that you choose, like linking up your receiver and your transmitter. That's all going to be in the documentation for those parts. And if you have any questions on how to build the car, remember I do have another set of videos. I'll leave all of that information in the description, as well as all the great documentation that Daniel has put together on his site. Now that everything's put together, let's take it out front and give it a try really quick. So it looks like everything is working as expected, and you saw some of those GoPro shots in that test. I just went with the default GoPro mount that comes with the camera. I stuck it down to the front of the car, and that works okay, but Daniel also has a part that screws down to the removable lid on the car, which keeps it looking a lot nicer, so check that out for sure. But now let's talk to the man that created this whole thing. I was lucky enough to get to talk to Daniel for a while and get his insights on this whole project.
Yeah, so this story started when I got my first 3D printer back in 2011, actually. So it's like a 10-year anniversary this year. I got the printer and I was super stoked about that, and I wanted to show all my friends, how cool 3D printing really is, because I printed, some nuts and bolts like everyone else, and people were like, "Yeah, not that cool." So I was thinking I need sort of a cool project to show off what you can really do with a 3D printer. So I started to think about it, and I came to the conclusion that a RC car would be really cool. And there weren't a lot of people that had done that before, so there were a few, but half and half, a little. Half of the car was taken from some other RC car and put together, and I started to look into it and try to get all the parts, but it was super complicated because I had to basically buy an entire car. So I started looking at RC cars and what should I, aim for. So at first, I think my goal was to see if it was possible for me to do it, actually build a RC car from scratch. So I started to build a touring car, a rally car, and I looked at other cars, off the shelf cars, to see how they were built, and I copied designs and I then converted them to something that would fit, me and my project, and to be able to print it on a 3D printer. Anyway, I finished that and it was really fun, and I decided that I would be able to actually build or design and build a car from scratch design it for 3D printing. So I looked around and I decided I would go for a truggy. I was more of a heavy terrain car. And in the beginning, I said, I won't stop until I can throw it off a balcony or something and it will hold up. And maybe that was aiming a little high, but worked for that for a couple of years. I said to myself that I want to design something that, anyone can print, or close to anyone. So I needed the design with, super loose tolerances and a simple enough design that you can just put together and, have fun. Even without the actual electronics, you can have something to show off your 3D printing on a shelf or something. Or you can, add electronics and have some extra fun with it.
So there it is, the OpenRC F1 upgrade and revisit. And I like this project so much, I've even started on a second car, because RC is always more fun with friends. And a huge thank you to Daniel for joining me for this video and all that he has contributed to our community. Check out all of his projects in the description below, and maybe consider supporting him over on Patreon, so he can continue to create awesome stuff. That will be it for today. Take care, everyone. I will leave you with more awesome OpenRC footage, and I'll see you on the next one. Ow! I am so sorry. I did not mean to do that. I think that's it for today.